Hello everyone, this is the last part of Backfist like a BUSHI. So in part 1 we talked about basic Uraken for linear momentum. In part 2 we talked about how we could up the speed and increase our kinetic energy. And in part 3 we talked about angular momentum. So this part is sort of the fun extra part that sort of utilises all those principles to sort of smaller or lesser extent. But it covers the one type of Uraken we haven't used because all of the Urakens we've done so far have been quite high. So obviously one other option we have is to Uraken low. So this technique, you'll see why we do this in the syllabus. I'll explain where it sort of fits into our context. But it's an example of Uraken that's Geidan. So it's a low Uraken designed to sort of drop my opponents a little bit to bring them forward. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay. So the attack for this technique is Uraken front kick. So we start with left leg forward. Now the basic way of doing this that we do is we include a block. So I'm going to break the block down first. So as the kick comes, we block the front kick using Geidan, using the forearm. So I'm not trying to use my hand or anything like that. We use the forearm. Now we don't drop back. We don't do the block for very long at all. The block is almost irrelevant, but you must cover. And we roll off the block. So as you come in, we drop. And the Uraken, which you may not see from there, is as my opponent's landing, you drop down to the groin. Right? And that does bring me very close to my opponent, but we'll discuss that in a second. So as this kick comes, I tenkan circular footwork into his third point, Uraken, and I obviously must cover in case this arm comes in, and obviously I've got my headbutt, my elbow, and other things we'll talk about in a second. So one more time. So that's just the basic bit. From there, we headbutt, we come in, and we use this as an opportunity to introduce Haragosh or sweeping loin to students. The thing that makes this different to perhaps some of the other throwing techniques you do earlier on, so if like the punch comes to the head, is that rather than being far away, the point is when I start this technique, so I'm doing the front kick, I'm already here. I'm already really close to my opponent, so it's very much a case of when you're at close range, right, we can use that Uraken. In Kakia, you might have this kind of feeling to pull my opponent down. What can we do at that kind of much shorter distance? So we have 1, 2, and then we're here. So you want to get low, consolidate your mass so that you're solid. If here you're tall, my opponent can grab around my waist and pick me up. So I need to be underneath him. My centre needs to be underneath him. I push with my legs. I need to create a lot of angular momentum very quickly by rotating around my pivot point when I do my throw. And it can be any koshiwaza, well, you just have to be koshiwaza, but we usually, for this technique, keep it as koshiwaza, so it could be ogashi, hip throw, or haragosh, super annoying, hanigosh, spring kick, whatever your personal preference is. So then, let's just look at a few variations of this. So one is I can make more use of the first block. So what I'm trying to do now is as my opponent comes in, I want to bring him more this way. I want to keep his linear momentum coming forward by adding to it. And you can see it creates this forward effect. Why? I don't want him to be able to deviate. If Alan does a very fast light kick, and he deliberately tries to do speed, I might not be able to catch him too much. So the goal is to bring him forward and then do the same. So I come 1, 2, in, and then whatever technique we're doing. Tenkan, circular footwork, doesn't have to be in one direction. So another version we could do is the kick comes into this one. Now my personal preference is I don't like turning without hitting. So for me, with this technique, if I do the basic version, the block is literally a cover and I almost go straight for the Uraken. So as I do it, I'm covering straight away and hit before he's landed. Then we're in. It could be body drop, another technique. If I'm doing Tenkan the other way, my personal preference is as the kick comes, is to be here. To take the head, then turn, then in. Ashiguruma, there's another version. So we have our basic variation. We have where we want to maintain his linear momentum. And we have where I rotate in the opposite direction. All the variations of this lower Uraken. If my opponent was to sort of do like a grab from behind or a bar choke or something like that, obviously it's okay to drop and use this Uraken to get me out. So it's really useful at close range. I wouldn't attempt to do this technique from far away and try to come in. I'm much better to set my opponent up. But if I'm already very close, dropping just to get that reaction is useful, mostly because it breaks his posture. So if we're in this position, I flinch his head forward, and that gets me the response I need to keep him off balance. So I hope you enjoyed the little series, Backfist like a BUSHI. So think about the scientific principles we've discussed: momentum, kinetic energy, angular momentum, and obviously the last one, which is a little bit of fun. But Uraken to me is a technique that's really diverse, really interesting, and the 4 techniques that we do for our green belt syllabus are in no way exhaustive. They are simply meant to be the 5% tip of the iceberg that introduces students to the potential of Uraken, because it can be used in so many different ways and is so versatile, which is, for me, is what keeps it interesting. So thank you for listening and watching this video. If you want to, please click like, please subscribe. Hopefully we'll see you next week. Bye guys.